Hello and welcome to our daily sketching routine. It is Monday, November 11th, 2024, and today's topic will be, the thought that comes to me is sketching themes, but basically I mean life themes. I'm not sure what to call it. And it's kind of an experiment, but we'll take it a step at a time. So this idea came to me, and before I begin, welcome back if you're returning, and welcome if you're new. I sketch and post every day, and I use 5-minute timers, which I'm starting right now, to stay focused and to build a daily sketching habit. But what I mean by sketching themes is, one, before we even get into it, it's kind of my mind is kind of swirling with ideas. But yeah, before we get into it, let's create, and you may just want to use this as a daily sketching routine to sketch whatever you want to begin with, and then just kind of see what I come up with, because I'm not sure. So I'm just going to draw a little picture frame, because I think with something like this, where you're kind of experimenting with an idea. Did it get blurry? Okay. Yeah, yesterday's video was kind of blurry on and off. Well, the first thing is it might be good to kind of create a small picture frame. Again, to not get lost in the details. And then the other thing is to kind of center yourself to sketch, to kind of get into the flow state and warm up. And again, especially if it's experimental. And the experimental part, it just has to do with, one, I want to create, at this point it'll be a sketch, which is why I wanted to keep it small, and have an idea for an illustration. So basically turning basic drawing and then making an illustration out of it, because I've always been a fan of illustration. I'm not really into so-called fine art or whatever, where it can just look like anything. I do like illustration. I do like art just for the sake of art. But when you kind of think about an illustration, it sort of needs to convey some kind of story, basically, or convey some kind of information. So let's just kind of talk about, I'll kind of switch between basic drawing, which is helpful for illustration. So I'll write down a few notes here. So one is basic drawing. So that's one thing. The other is drawing from imagination. And then the next thing would be the theme part of it. Themes. How do I fix the blurriness? I'm not even sure why it's doing that. Maybe the camera's too close. Okay, I'll just kind of keep an eye on it, I guess. Excuse me if it gets blurry sometimes. So for example, one thing I've noticed is I like to sketch mountains, and I never get tired of looking at them. And I have a video where I talk about sketching with the opposite hand. So I'm going to sketch with my right hand, and I'm just gonna, and part of that is to kind of get out of like the analytical part of the mind, and plus you can kind of get good natural shapes. So I'm going to do this, and so for example, in a way, I guess this could be fine art, I don't know. It could also be an illustration. It's illustrating mountains, what looks like mountains. So that's 5 minutes. I'll start another one. It could also just be abstract. I mean, it could just be a line, like a seismograph. Yeah, it could be all of those things. And so, in a way, it helps you to keep a daily sketching habit, because we just did 5 minutes of sketching. I know I was just kind of talking for most of that, but yeah, I mean, part of it is just not only facing the blank page, but also thinking about sketching in itself being an interesting thing to do. It is a very uniquely human thing to do. It does incorporate a lot of your mind and your body, so it can be therapeutic, I suppose. And so just kind of continuing, like, mountains are kind of a theme for me. And so that's kind of why I wanted to experiment with this and explore the ideas a little bit more. And also talk about like basic drawing. So for example, this is the line here. And then next, I'm still going to keep drawing with my opposite hand, which might be something you might want to play around with. And in fact, when I learned, well, as I play guitar, like I'm still learning and playing, I just use the opposite. Like I use my right hand, which some left-handers, they switch. Like they'll flip the guitar or restring it. I just went ahead and learned it right-handed. And so I've kind of done that with like different things, just because like if I don't know how to do something, I just go ahead and learn it. Like, so I'm kind of ambidextrous, but not really, kind of, sort of. So this is me sketching with my right hand. And I find this to be kind of good for these random, like fractal type subjects. So one thing with mountains is you can just do this, create some form. And so I find it relaxing to sketch mountains. So that's kind of a life theme, I think, for me. So once you get this, so this is like the second part. So the first part was just doing the contour or like the silhouette. And now you did this part. Then the next part might be to sketch this side to give it kind of a 3D-ness to it, like coming towards you. So part of this is basic drawing. It's drawing from imagination. You're just kind of making this up. You're not looking at anything. Part of it is the theme, meaning like the symbolism involved. And theme doesn't have to be complicated. It could just be just like a recurring interest. So that's like the first kind of the sketch of the mountain here. Now I'm going to switch back here because it is kind of tiring to draw with your other hand. So kind of sticking with the basic drawing, then you could start to add some shading. And so with that, you might want to just pick a side where the light's coming from, and we'll just say we'll say the left side, but then you can start to, and you can use a pencil if you want. I'm going to keep this kind of even and going in the same direction, but notice that because of the outline here, like it does differentiate. It looks a little different. So that's 5 minutes. I'll start another one. And I've talked about how like this is kind of like the second pass of the sketch where you start to differentiate between the light and dark side. So you can kind of do this. And so see how in some areas where it's not outlined, it'll look less defined. And so what this is this is the global like value. I talked about that in the guitar sketching trilogy videos. So this is just, it's not taking into account like the material, like what the mountain is actually made of. But kind of moving on. So that's basic drawing. And then from imagination, meaning this is something imagined and something that like my opposite hand drew. And then the theme is just the idea of the mountain and what it represents. The next thing, I'm going to use my right hand again. I'm going to draw clouds. So that's kind of like another theme. So you might want some clouds that, to begin with, are going to be behind this mountain. And then kind of draw. Clouds are very interesting. Very, very interesting to study. So just come up with something that, excuse me, looks interesting. So I just put some big clouds behind the mountains. And you don't want to overdo it because you don't want the clouds to compete with like the mountain. So I would just leave that. And I just used my opposite hand to get more of a kind of a natural look to it. And this kind of has like the wind is blowing a certain way. I mean, it can look like anything really. But like once you get this part, again, because of like the you can kind of think about the global value, meaning the clouds will have some shading. And notice that by doing that, you're creating form. Some are outlined, so it's going to look more defined. And then some of the forms will look less defined because you didn't outline it. And that's an artistic choice. So you can do some shading like this. So this is a very basic, like, drawing from imagination, basic drawing, but kind of sticking with like a theme, an idea that you have. Let's just call this themes or like idea. So mountains, like clouds is kind of a theme. Another theme is like a road, like a winding road. That seems to be kind of a recurring theme. I mean, in general, but like also for me. So now that we have this picture, we're starting to define, like, it's starting to become like an illustration. Well, it could just be like a landscape, but from imagination, which is kind of cool. I mean, it's cool that we can do that. But maybe start to have, so if I go like this, so now what I've done is, so I'm going to go over it again. So there's several things going on here. So basic drawing, part of that is composition. So I'll just put that composition there. So now we were already composing, but now we've defined it a bit more. So now we have like a foreground. So that's 5 minutes. And so now the mountains became like the middle, and then the clouds became the background. And so that's composition. And then a trick, if you want to call it that, to sort of create depth is if you do like an overlap right here. So now you're creating depth a couple of ways. One, by creating a foreground right here. And then I'm going to just go over this line right here. And just by the line width. Make sure we're on camera. So just by this, it looks closer. See. Also, value creates. So notice that we just kind of did like a kind of a global value pattern. But now let's begin to think about like the local value pattern. Now what I mean by that is, you'll notice in photos, or if like in life, if you see it, stuff that's further back, you can't really tell the material. Like it kind of blends in together. And that's because of the atmospheric perspective, as it's called. But stuff that's like close to you, you're going to notice textures. You're going to notice differences in texture. So that's what we can create here. Now, this could be brush strokes. It's the same. You could use a smaller brush for this. If you were to paint and just use like one brush, which is not a bad exercise, it's the same. I mean, it would be more like cross-hatching or something. There's painting is its own thing, which I'm gonna do, but yeah, it's its own kind of discipline. So notice how that worked right there. So now we've implied some kind of foreground with some kind of like difference. It pushed that back. You can create, so I'm being a little bit more deliberate, but by just using my dominant hand here. You can go like this. Now, you might want to think, well, where's the horizon line? Well, you can kind of imply the horizon line right here. by going like this. So not only are you kind of establishing the horizon line right here, you're also like creating like depth. And just to keep it kind of simple, you might want to, again, it depends on the medium you're using. So I'm using a pen, so I'm going to just cross hatch, but notice, what if I cross hatch? I mean, this is a good way to, I mean, this is a value study also. So like if I squint and notice that this is currently the darkest part of this, of the value pattern, then the next one could be this one. And still keeping it at like the second pass, meaning I'm still differentiating, but we're sort of moving into like the third one where you're going to do a, like you're pushing the values, you're doing more of a, introducing like the mid-tone part of it. That's 5 minutes. I'll start another one. And we're not going to finish this. We're just, I might work on it some more. Well, I mean, I am, but maybe I'll do a recording or whatever. But I think there's a lot of useful concepts that I'm going over. So at this point, you can kind of like keep the idea going. And also, I would, just for simplicity's sake, so I'm keeping everything very basic to begin with, because complexity, you can always add that, but like if the basic part is off, it's difficult to fix. And part of why it's like that is because I'm using a pen, and I'm just doing that on purpose to force myself to have to think about it. The thing with, I'm not sure if I made that mark there, but anyway, the thing with pencil is sometimes you can be off, but like since you can keep messing with the pencil, you keep repeating like the mistake is the thing. So for example, I'm using very basic concepts of drawing. I'm using the same pen, so I'm not going to worry about that. Like if I need difference in value, I'm just going to use the line to do that. The other thing is, if I'm shading, like I'm going to shade this part. So we're moving from like the second pass of this to like the third pass, because we're getting more of a value shift. So for example, let's just create a chart real quick. And first let's do 3. And you can match up what you're doing right here if you're not sure. And then the next one would be this. And then you're saying that that's the white of the paper right there. And in the first pass, you might just do this much. I mean, not first, but like second pass. So in the first pass, you're just drawing. So this is the mountain thing right here. And in the next one, you are creating the shading part. And in the third one, this one, you've created basically 3, but you can start to have like a gradation right here. So, and basically just practice that. And the idea is that if you push this, so how would you push this? Well, there's different ways. And again, that's why I'm doing like a small picture, so that I can do it without wasting too much time if it's not what I like. So I'm going to go in the same direction right here. Again, using the same pen. It could be a pencil or it could be a brush. And I'm just going to go in the same direction, but just by doing this, it's going to get darker. And I'm going to ask myself, like, how do I get the gradation to be, or like the values to transition? So a lot of that comes from like kind of squinting at it, kind of, yeah, like sort of squint and go over this again. And that's what it means to have like a plan, like a value plan. So these are things that would throw me off, like as I was learning stuff, like I wasn't sure. And it's just good to like really know this and then introduce color to it. Because if you introduce color and you keep the colors pretty basic, because again, color is its own thing. I mean, it's probably good to, for example, start with a few colors, like limited, and then just really understand like what it's doing. Now, you could also just mess around and just come up with whatever. I mean, there's nothing wrong with that either. It's just if you're wanting to have it be more like an illustration or communicate something a little bit clearer. So this is the overall pattern, like value. And I would just kind of stick with this. So for example, if this is looking pretty okay, because notice that there's nothing that says that this like has to be darker than that. That's 5 minutes. I'll start another 5-minute timer and kind of wrap it up. Like there's nothing that says that, because if you look at any photo, you'll see that the light, I mean, if we're talking about like a landscape, I mean, this could be dark because of something casting a shadow on it. It's just whatever is interesting. You have to just kind of play around with it, do thumbnails. Because, yeah, it just depends. Like, it depends on the time of day, the atmospheric conditions. It depends on well, since we're using our imagination, it depends on, like, what you want to do. And also, with, like, the direction that you're going when you shade, it also creates some stuff. And you want to leave like some room for happy accidents. I mean, I'll get into like painting and stuff. I'm just being methodical. Plus, there's also a lot of great resources on YouTube for all of this. So if you want to keep it kind of simple, once you have, like, I mean, it's starting to look kind of interesting. Then for the values, again, I wouldn't introduce, like, let's say you can differentiate between this. So that's what that is. Then this one. And then you already have, like, the white of the paper. Like, don't go darker than that. Like, the line is also a value. So like if I were to outline this, it would change the value of that. And like the stuff that's in the back isn't going to look darker, if that makes sense. And like as you start to unify, or as you start to like detail it, then you can start to add like little, you might want to go in and add, like that's like the final detail stage, which isn't what we're doing. And I've talked about that a lot more these days, like the idea of the different stages. So this next one right here, where I'm just kind of doing this is like the third pass, second to third pass. And what I'm doing is I've introduced these values here, and I'm going to start to compose this picture, refine it, but don't throw off like the value, because as soon as you make one like darker than like this, for example, let's say you like go, but that's kind of what I mean about like, so the next step would be the next value step would be like that much darker. So it might not be a bad idea to do like a scale for yourself, because it's kind of like a color palette, but this is values, or tone, if you want to call it that. But notice that I don't have anything like that goes here. Part of that is because I'm using a pen, and if I go like that dark, I'm not going to be able to like take it back unless I use whiteout, which I don't want to use. So as I add detail, because once you're here, again, this is all from imagination, but once you're here, your mind will start to, and also you can look up reference, and it's not going to look like this. You'll just get some ideas, and that's not a bad thing either. And yeah, if you can find like black and white. But notice that I might go in and add like more definition, but I'm not gonna, like, we haven't gotten to this part, so I'm not gonna make it like here. I'm gonna keep it at the third pass, as I'm calling it. You can call it some other name, but so it's like keeping in mind, starting to add a little bit more of like the actual texture of the stuff, of what's in here, but like kind of also keeping the overall overall light coming from this side. And it wouldn't be a bad idea if you are gonna just look at reference. So that's 5 minutes. I'll start to wrap up this video, to sort of see how you can simplify it, like take the photo but simplify it like this. And that's really what makes it artistic. It's the choices that you make, not the fact that, because even if you made it the most photorealistic thing, first of all, it's never going to look as good as a photo, and second, like, it just won't. Like, and then the next thing would be that it still wouldn't look realistic enough, because there's nothing that can replicate life. Like, there's nothing that can capture, like, I mean, because as soon as you, like, a millisecond goes by, the image just changed in life. Like, that's how life works. So then it just becomes a matter of, you're just editing the drawing. Now, that just kind of brings up that whole idea of, as I wrap this up, as like I said, like, why not just let the AI like generate this kind of thing? It's just such a weird, like, it's so weird that like that's something that comes up. I mean, but like, it's just kind of in your face and it comes up, and it's just like a weird thing. I never thought about that as I was a kid and like learning to draw and stuff. It was just not something that was, I mean, I guess it's kind of like when you invent nuclear weapons, now you have to kind of think about it and deal with it. But yeah, that's like another topic. I don't know. I don't know the answer. But yeah, you can see this. I guess it took about 20 or 30 minutes to kind of, I mean, it would go faster if you were not talking like I am. But and yeah, it depends on the medium. Like, if I'm using pen, sometimes I'll have to go and like fix things like this. I would still be aware of like the value pattern. But like, sometimes having to fix stuff I like, because like that's the happy accident part. Kind of adds spontaneity. But when I get to this point, I might decide to myself, like, am I going to keep it like a pen and ink drawing? Because in that case, I might want to add a lot more detail, and I might use like a smaller pen, stuff like that. Or if it's just going to be like a tonal study, I might look up reference and just kind of make the, like, start to introduce like this value, but like get ideas from reference. If I wasn't going to use reference, I would just kind of start to introduce this one, but like more locally, as I call it, meaning you might want to create more of a gradation, like this pattern, but like closer up here. We've already sort of went in this direction when I started outlining this more like boldly. It was starting to go towards like the darkest dark of the picture. But play around with that. Hopefully I kind of covered these ideas I had. I didn't really know what I was going to sketch, but I do know that these themes are kind of like the road and the mountains and the clouds kind of fit my personality. So yeah, thank you for joining me today for a daily sketching routine. Hopefully you come back, and if you like these videos, please support the channel. It helps me out and I appreciate it. And until next time, keep on sketching.